Hi, everyone. This is the first of a series of informal conversations that I'm hosting to help people who are on sabbatical find real life hubs that they can join temporarily, whether it's a week, a month, or more, to get exposure to new people, new ways of thinking, and new ways of working. And I'm here with Andrew Rose from Fractal, a neighborhood campus that was founded, I think, in 2021, Andrew, and based in New York City. Andrew, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey.
Would you be able to start us off by telling us what Fractal is and specifically what's distinctive about this hub that you've built?
Um, yeah, of course. It's kind of a long story, but I'll try to keep it short, and we're trying to get better at describing it. But Fractal is like a new kind of civic society, you could say, that blends education, housing, co-living, community, parenting, and kind of like a village atmosphere with also ambition and living in the city. Um, there's a specific problem that Fractal was designed to solve, and it was the problem that my wife and I had, which was that we moved away from our hometowns, both of us, to pursue ambitious careers that we thought we could only pursue in some of the country's biggest cities. And in doing so, one quickly feels alienated, which is quite tragic because being ambitious, of course, we live a good life. I mean, it's not like we're ambitious because we want bad lives. We're ambitious because we want good lives. So there's this kind of complicated question, which is, can I have it all? Can I have the village and the godparents who help me raise my children and the cousins and the uncles and the aunts and all of my friends? And can I see them every day the same way that I would in my hometown? And can people just like stop by and knock on my door and like drop by my house spontaneously without having to coordinate in advance and schedule some sort of dinner? And can I continue to take classes with my friends like I did in college? And can I do all of that while pursuing my career? The answer, it turns out, is yes, you can. And the way that we structure that answer is kind of Fractal itself, which, in terms of like atoms or whatever, like physically, if you looked at it, it looks like maybe 10 different kind of co-living houses across New York City, mostly in Brooklyn, including one building that has itself maybe 10 to 12 units that we rent. And by we, there's no party that rents them. I guess I mean people who are part of Fractal rent them. And we kind of call that the campus. So there is some core campus that a bunch of young adults live in. I guess just fully adults now. Um, and then increasingly many of us are getting married and having kids, and then kind of branching off from that main unit. Um, on top of that, there are weekly classes. There's like over 30 classes every semester. We host semesters 3 times a year through a community college that we created called Fractal University. Um, and there's also some co-working spaces because most of us have careers as well. So there's like 3 different co-working spaces, um, which offer a variety of programming ranging from the arts to science and technology. So that's what it is right now. And then over time, maybe it'll expand to be more things.
Incredibly cool. So the neighborhood, the university, the co-working space, co-working
Right.
spaces is Fractal, like the one of its kind for now.
We're inspired by historical examples first, and we're certainly not
Mm.
one of a kind now. When we started, um, I'd say some of the groups that most inspire us, like there's a lot of groups in London. The Royal Society is very inspiring to me personally.
Mm.
So they started in out of Gresham College and a few other of the core colleges, Oxford, Cambridge, in London. All these cities are close enough that people would kind of meet up and attend the same coffee shops and see each other. And maybe it wasn't quite as village like, but it was deeply informal despite being created as a collaboration between deeply formally ambitious individuals. So it was kind of like the Royal Society actually started as almost the informal branch of the sciences. of course, then going on to basically carry the torch of science as we know it from there. And then there are similar projects that happen around the University of Paris. And if you kind of look into it, there's like, it turns out every intellectual culture that we look up to, and most people that we look up to in history actually were part of some intellectual scene. A lot of those intellectual scenes gathered in specific kind of urban campuses, often around coffee shops or, shared spots or shared club meeting houses. In terms of right now, we started our project with a collaborator out in San Francisco named Jason Ben. He started a project called the Neighborhood SF. And similarly, out in San Francisco, there's a project called the Commons. And these are all people that we see as like building civic society as well at the same time that we were building it. Since then, there's been a bunch of good work. There's a woman named Savannah Kruger who runs a program called the Neighborhood Accelerator Program, the NAP, and she helps people kind of organize neighborhoods all across the country. And so now there are dozens of those. And then we also run a program called the Campus Accelerator Program that helps people organize these kind of ambitious campuses all around the world. And now we have, 5 in Europe and another 8 in the US or something like that. They're not called Fractal. It's kind of decentralized. We're just teaching people how to do it, and then they can kind of do it on their own.
What is it like to live in Fractal today? So if someone came to visit, say, for like a month, what could their weekday look like?
So realistically, Fractal is very decentralized, and this means a couple things. It means that there is no such singular experience that I can describe that any visitor would have, because we don't have a tourism industry, and we're not trying to have a tourism industry. So we're a village, and like if you join the village, you have to join the village, which means if we don't like you, then you're not invited. So like that is an inevitable aspect of running a project like this, is that you will attract people who really don't create anything that you want when they're around, or actively cause people to feel bad or whatever. But that's fine. We obviously let people know. Let's say that we have like an application form, people can apply to come visit and stuff like that. And plenty of people do visit all the time. So in the case that you, dear listener, who is likely a very good person and would be fun to hang out with, come visit, you're kind of responsible for taking advantage of a lot of the resources that you have available to you. So that, again, there's not like some sort of official tourism program or anything like that. On the other hand, you would realistically be living in a shared unit. So like, let's say you wake up and it's Wednesday or something. You realistically are living in some shared unit in the McKibben Lofts, which means you wake up and your roommates are probably up and you're probably hanging out a little bit, and then people are kind of just discussing their plans for the day. Or let's say it's like a weekend, or maybe your roommates don't have jobs or whatever, because there are plenty of people at Fractal who are on sabbatical as well already. It's like a quality of people who live here, is that they're kind of transitioning their careers. So people would discuss their days. They'd be discussing co-working. Realistically, you might, if you are feeling like you don't have a social basis for the day and you want one, you could go to Merlin's Place. Merlin's Place is a third space that's built into the building. There would realistically be a bunch of people there, maybe like 5 to 10, and they'd kind of be hanging out and discussing their plans for the day. If that wasn't the vibe, for whatever reason, you could then go to Fractal Tech or Tilo's House, which are both 2 other co-working spaces. Fractal Tech, I think, has more membership. At Fractal Tech, people would be, if it's Sunday, there would be brunch. So you could come to Sunday brunch, which is basically open, certainly open to visitors. And you'd meet maybe 30 to 40 people, a few families, a few children would be running around. You'd bring some food to the potluck and kind of hang out with people and discuss, what everyone's up to. On a weekday, you could come work out of the co-working space. At Fractal Tech, the co-working space is mostly for founders and engineers, who are like the main people that you would find there, and is pretty heads down and focused during most hours, but we have a lounge and people can kind of like hang out in the lounge. Most evenings there are events. realistically, also, if you were kind of hanging out with people and asking what people are up to, there would be something like 5 events a night that you could choose between. There's just a lot of events across all of the Fractal nodes. It's quite crazy just because of how many classes. And then Fractal Tech alone, just our space, we do sometimes more than 7 events a week. And we don't do them during the day. So that's just evenings and weekends. After that, it would be pretty natural, I'd say. So it's like that's a lot of the core infrastructure that we have. Only visiting for a month, it's unlikely that you're signing up for a Fractal University class because those tend to require more than month-long commitments. There are a few clubs that you might be able to join, like reading clubs and book clubs and stuff like that. And then the other thing we'd kind of recommend you do is like post in the Fractal Discord and be like, hey, I'm going to the Met, or like I'm going to hang out. Anyone want to join? And you'd be able to schedule, like you could probably schedule 2 or 3 coffees a day for the entire month that you're there, just with the people who are already in the Fractal community, if you wanted to do something like that and to make a lot of friends individually. And like I said, from there, it's pretty organic. So you'd probably just be managing your days after that, all using that infrastructure, but up to you ultimately.
Yeah, very little hand-holding, but a lot of events and organized things that you can choose to join. So it's your responsibility to come in, have a look at everything that's available, and then pick and go put energy into the things that you want to see more of, basically.
Yeah, and it's very New York. And it may even be the best person to talk to about this anymore. Like, I work 60 to 70 hours a week, and I'm raising my daughter, and I have a family. So, like, my view on this stuff is sort of, like, quite non-social. Fractal obviously is an incredibly social place filled with incredibly social people. If you interviewed somebody who runs Merlin's place, they might have a completely different answer for you than the answer that I gave, because ultimately my view of what Fractal even is in some ways myopic and informed by the stuff that I have to do every week. But what I mean by we're fundamentally in New York is just like we all live lives as New Yorkers. We're not like a festival, or we're not a retreat center or anything like that. We're not a meditation center. So there's not like a lot of spaciousness that you're going to find at Fractal to like consider all of the things. You'll find like a lot of people who have a lot of spaciousness, but the overall vibe of the thing is pretty deeply embedded in the city already. So what you'll find is like some deep connection with New York, some deep connection with the city and with the city's ambition.
So you could be a New Yorker
Right.
who chooses to see New York in a different way through the lens of Fractal, but you could also come
Sure.
from a different city, but also a different country altogether, and experience New York via Fractal. It would actually provide a nice structure for someone to land into rather than try and find some place to stay in New York on their own.
Yeah, like what are we good at structure for? And again, man, there's so many views on what Fractal is that you could have from so many different perspectives. So I'll just try to give mine. But like even Tyler's would be dramatically different than mine. And Tyler is also a kind of core organizer at Fractal. But we are exceptional, I'd say, at raising people's aspirations and unblocking people's ambitions and helping people accomplish kind of unlikely, ambitious goals that they don't, that they're like procrastinating on or going too slowly on, overwhelmingly, I'd say. And when people say something like, oh, I've never hosted a party, we're like, okay, like let's just host one tomorrow. There's just no, let's host one tonight. We could just get 100 people to show up because we have Partiful and we have a city and we're in New York. And similarly, if people want to start a company, we're just like, okay, let's start one next week. Like, what are we selling? How do we make sales? Like, let's put up a Stripe page. I think that structure specifically, the structure of taking wherever you're at and feeling like you want to be accelerated along a path and you want people to kind of push you to continue taking the next step and not accept kind of excuses or unnecessary like slowdowns. And then if you want to like settle, we're also really good for that because all of us inherently have settled because this is a village, like we're here long term, but we've kind of settled into our own pace. So if you're just visiting, we're not a great culture for like settling in if you're just visiting.
What is a good length of sabbatical in your experience for
Hmm.
people who are coming to Fractal, and why?
Um, I don't know if there's any good length of a sabbatical necessarily. What I tend to think is, there's this phrase like when you've got the message, hang up the phone.
Yeah.
And I think sabbaticals exist for the same reason. If you get the message for what you need to do with your life, you can just do it. And then you're not on sabbatical anymore. You're just doing the next thing.
Mm.
Fractal is, I would say, an accelerator for finding the next thing and for deciding what you're doing with your life. We tend to get pretty frustrated, not like literally or directly, but I'd say almost like spiritually with people who don't know what they're doing with their lives. And I don't think they feel comfortable here. Um,
Mm.
but if you're in the middle of figuring it out, then we like love those people and we spend like a lot of resources helping people figure it out. There's this phase that's sort of like, I'm not interested in figuring out what I'm doing. And also, I don't know what I'm doing. That's like, okay, we're not for you. Like, Fractal is not good. In terms of how long does it take, like, let's say you're in that phase of your sabbatical where you really want to figure out what's next. I've had people figure it out within literally like 4 hours of dropping into Fractal. And then we just like figure it out in the smallest possible sense, that is. So like they come, like I had one conversation with somebody. This was a really funny one, where he came. We were getting lunch. He was like, I've really always dreamed of being a beekeeper. This was like within 15 minutes of lunch, and then I was just like, you can be a beekeeper right now. Like we have a roof top garden. You can just put bees on our rooftop garden. And then he was like, really? And I was like, yes. And then he was just a beekeeper. Now, obviously, that's a small thing, but like for somebody who's on their sabbatical, that's exactly the sort of little side quest that takes you a few days, and then you're like, maybe you feel completely differently from the way you felt before. Um, and then we just kept collaborating from there and doing more stuff. This happens pretty frequently, I'd say, where people visit, they express some desire. I say, you can just have that literally today, easily. And then they're like, I didn't realize that. That doesn't seem possible. And I'm like, well, that's New York. Like, New York allows you to do anything that you want because there's 10 million people here. It's the densest city in the country, filled with very ambitious people. And then their minds kind of get a little bit exploded. And then they run experiments from there. And if those experiments fail, you're kind of back to square one. But if they succeed, then sabbatical over.
Yeah. Well, or they succeed and then you want to try something else because you've had a
Right.
taste of what, not taking responsibility. We'll come into
Yeah.
that later, but what a taste of what taking action
Yeah.
feels like. And then you're like, actually, I can do that, so I can do more stuff, and then they keep going.
Yeah.
They're interesting stories, the ones that you tell. But this is the beekeeper story. I'm also pointing to the party story that you told earlier. Someone coming in and saying, "Hey, I've never organized a party. Okay, cool. Organize one for tonight or tomorrow." Those are the kinds of experiences that people who have been in a job for a very long time, ticking off like to-do lists and not really deciding for themselves what they wanted to do, they've kind of lost touch with that ability to take action for themselves, to know what they want, and then to actually do it.
Yeah. And I'd say because we
Go
have
to
so
the
many
roof.
people doing so many different things in life, and so many people are on sabbaticals,
Mm,
yeah, we are also pretty decent at helping people notice their values, which I think is like the core to
mm,
noticing what you want. It's like, well, notice
yeah.
what you value, and notice what you spend time on, notice what you attend to. So like, a lot of people get embarrassed by this sometimes. I'm like, what is it that you actually do when you don't have to do anything? And then it'll sometimes be like, oh, I watch Mr. Beast on YouTube. And it's like, you value that. You value it. Now, I'm not telling you what you value about it because you might also feel ashamed of it too. But the truth is that the stuff that you do when no one's compelling you is the stuff that you value. And by realizing that, you can kind of pull apart the parts that you value and then start to build those up into your life in ways that are pro-social or in ways that like make you feel good. Um,
Mm.
Especially if the things that you do that you value are things that you like feel ashamed about or whatever, like playing video games all day or whatever. Um, anyway, but that's a conversation for another time, I suppose.
I'm recalling a conversation that you had with Richard Bartlett from Castillo in Barcelona, or close to Barcelona, where you were talking about the importance of taking responsibility. And that's like taking responsibility to actually make stuff happen, but ultimately taking responsibility for your own life. Um,
Yeah.
Fractal feels like a catalyst for that.
Yep.
And I was hoping you could help explain to those who are on sabbatical who actually want to do something but don't really know how can
Yeah.
Fractal help them do that?
Well, the classic way to learn things is that your peers model it for you, and then you just copy your peers. This is like how most kids learn most things, and it's also how most adults learn most things, but we just kind of forget, and then we think that we learn most things from books, which is also very valuable, by the way. I do love books, obviously. But um, Fractal is filled with people who are taking responsibility for their lives. And not just their lives, but their society and their like little local community. And the fact that somebody has to bring their friends together on Sundays, and somebody has to build co-working spaces for their friends, and somebody has to train people, and somebody has to run classes. And it's not like somebody has to in some compelling, weird sense of like, oh, we should like make it so that people are compelled or incentivized very heavily in order to do these things. It's more like all of us feel some sense that we live better lives and enjoy our societies more when we are responsible for core aspects of that society. And we all want other people to both feel that same sense of self-efficacy and joy that we get from feeling responsible for core aspects of our society, and also the sort of respect and dignity that you get from your peers when you're responsible for some core aspect of your society. Now, obviously, the way to start with being responsible for social things is to just be responsible for individual things, like be responsible for things just for your own sake, just because you want to. But you can kind of bootstrap it in both directions depending on how you're motivated. Some people are more socially motivated. If that's the case, you can often bootstrap a sense of responsibility by doing something for others, but without compelling them or making them feel like they have to show up or making them feel like they have to contribute or be part of it or whatever, like just actually doing it as service. Fractal is very, very good at that. And the decentralized nature makes it a lot better at it. So Fractal doesn't have any meetings. Like there's literally no Fractal meeting that exists. Nobody ever has to meet with anybody else. Meetings might get called, but like nobody has to show up. And there's no government, and there's no idea of like community events that everyone has to come to or whatever. It's all bottom up, created through consensus. Or not, actually, literally the opposite of consensus, actually. It's bottom up, created through action, I guess. Just like people independently deciding what they want to do with their lives. That is the sort of environment that also creates responsibility, just because if something doesn't go the way you want, there is no system by which you could manipulate any sort of rules or process in order to get what you want. The only possible way to get what you want in an environment like this is just to take responsibility for the outcome and then improve on the thing that you were trying to do. And we try to teach that to people over time. So like, that's kind of abstract. Let me give some examples. We have a lot of people who want to do things like start cafes or create co-working spaces or create third spaces so that people can gather together. We also have people who want to do certain types of events, or they want to teach certain types of classes. We have a lot of infrastructure so that is possible. So we have Fractal University, where you could host your class if you wanted, and we have a lot of people in our community who might come to your third space. But every time somebody comes to me and says they want to do something like that, like for instance, if somebody came to me and said, hey, I really want to start a third space where people can gather and like form communities and create shared bonds, I'd say, well, who's going to pay for it? And then we'd talk through the financial model, and we'd do the spreadsheet, and like I have a spreadsheet, so I'd send them the spreadsheet that's like, here's a spreadsheet for third spaces, like here's one that pencils. I run a third space actually. And then we'd look at it, and then I'd say like, how are you going to fill in these numbers? And in this sense, for any given task, there is a way to make it work without compelling other people, just by understanding the mechanics of the thing. And Fractal, I think, is pretty good at helping people understand the mechanics of the infrastructure they want to build, so to speak, especially if it's social.
So who tends to thrive most in this context?
We say friendly, ambitious nerds internally. We can kind of break down each of those parts and discuss, but in this case, friendly kind of means like fundamentally pro-social, kind, open, like wants to make the world better, wants other people to feel better, wants to be like helpful, these sorts of things, I think tends to be it tends to be really beneficial just because everyone else is friendly, and like friendliness works with friendliness quite well. Um, Ambitious is pretty important because you can end up in some sort of like group hug of death if you're too friendly and you don't have any standards. So ambitious
Mm-hmm.
works quite well for Fractal so that you don't end up in any sort of group hug of death with anybody else, because you have high standards for yourself, you have high standards for others around you, and you're not going to tolerate people. And you might tolerate their existence, sorry, like tolerance is obviously good, but you might not tolerate collaboration with people if those people aren't meeting some standard that you have. Even though you might tolerate like hanging out with them and talking to them and like encouraging them and raising their ambitions, you might just say like, hey, maybe we shouldn't work together. And then nerdy is good because in terms of friendly ambitious, like we're not like friendly ambitious bankers. We're not like friendly ambitious finance people. Like there are some finance people and there are some bankers, and like we're generally open, that's good. But we're pretty novel in terms of our interests and highly curious. And one of the core aspects of Fractal is a university where we teach a bunch of classes across the spectrum, like all the way from economics to like weird experimental dance styles. People who are incurious aren't, like, in other words, who aren't nerdy, I think are going to struggle a little bit to understand the vast amount of intellectual kind of inspiration that people are calling from, and they might start to think that's weird. Nerdy people, I think, would respond in many cases by being like, oh, that's interesting. Why do you like that? Like that, I have never heard of that before. That's quite interesting to me. What's going on? And they respond by investigating. If you don't have that investigative instinct, I would say you probably could still succeed in Fractal in many ways, but over time you might end up rubbing the wrong way against the culture because you'll feel like a bunch of people are investigating random things that don't matter, which is completely true. A bunch of people are investigating random things that don't matter. That's what it means to be nerdy.
Do you have conversations with people when they don't fit in well? How does those conversations happen? How do you help make sure that the space, you and everyone in the community, the space keeps its identity in a way?
Sure. Well, everything's decentralized, and we are trying to be like a regular place, and so inevitably there are people who don't fit in everywhere, and like in many ways that's okay. So what do I mean by decentralized here? It's like there's layers to everything. Everything is itself fractal. So the idea of like, let's say you show up to a public event that I'm hosting at my workplace, like it's a hackathon for technologists, and that hackathon is open to anyone who wants to build something, and you come and you are like coding, but you're also like, I don't know, like I wouldn't be your friend. Like maybe we just wouldn't get along, or maybe like you don't fit this friendly ambitious nerd thing. Like maybe you're not that ambitious, but you're like, and you're not even that friendly. You're kind of like a grumpy, like curmudgeonly, nerdy person because you're here to hack. I would just let you be, and we'd hang out, and I'd look at your thing that you demo, and we'd have fun together. And then like I wouldn't invite you to my Sunday brunch because my Sunday brunch is for my friends, but that's completely fine. Like we're acquaintances now. You're in the space, like we live in the same society. Obviously, we should interact with each other and form bonds. Those bonds should just be like right distanced. So as long as people are in right relation, nothing needs to change, and there doesn't need to be any intervention, no matter whether or not that person would fit in with the culture. It's like we're part of New York City, and for that reason, we have to find right relation with all of the 10 million people who are here. So I just kind of encourage every community organizer in Fractal to do a good job of setting their own boundaries for everything that they host. So some things you host are for the public. If that's the case, then the public can come. Some things that you host are private, and if the thing that you're hosting is private, then you can police boundaries however you want. And there's not going to ever be some like overall group policing. There's no like overall policing of Fractal. Fractal isn't something that can be policed. There is no government. There's no system of boundaries for the whole thing. On the other hand, there are like kind of membranes that you kind of have to walk through. So like, how do you get invited in the first place? And how do you find out about it in the first place? Like, we're not super public. We don't advertise on Instagram. Like there are reasons for that. Just because we would get overwhelmed by interest. So we could get DDoSed. So part of the protection is like remaining somewhat illegible such that all these situations can be handled on a case-by-case basis. The other thing, obviously, is any sort of danger, harassment, or violence, like in any sense of the term. I just immediately, like, this is like an immune system or something. There are some people in the community who know how to take responsibility for in dangerous situations. I am certainly one of them. If there is ever a dangerous situation, not just with events that I'm hosting, but with events that anyone I even know is hosting, I will just personally take responsibility to go find the person, excommunicate them, say that they're not invited to anything ever again that they ever hear about that's even related to Fractal, and then ask them to leave. And obviously that's the, you kind of have to have a right response to different situations. But
Absolutely, and that's the end of the spectrum that you're talking about.
Right.
One of the ends of the spectrum, yeah.
But in terms of like what somebody would feel like if
they
they just didn't jive, or if they felt a small sort of amount of friction, I would say most likely they're probably just feeling it in a particular room. Like they probably wouldn't feel that if it was small, if it was just a small thing, and it wasn't about them, like they have, I don't know, just some overall bad vibes or something, then they might just go to a different room and feel completely differently, because Fractal is filled with like a lot of different types of people.
People who go on sabbatical tend to be people who are looking for their thing, looking for their people. So they go to places. It usually takes them quite a lot of courage to go to a new place, put themselves outside of their comfort zone, so they feel a bit vulnerable. So knowing that the community cares about safety, I mean, on all ends of the spectrum, like the actual, very difficult, the very difficult situations are actively managed. The ones that aren't that, complicated are just managed organically. This is something that's great for people who are thinking about coming and who feel a bit vulnerable. It's great for them to hear it.
Yeah.
And
again,
then
it's
I've
just
got
like the scale here. I don't know if I've ever explicitly mentioned, but the scale of like who is part of Fractal is like 1,000 people or something. And then the number of people who are living in Fractal at any given time is something like 100 people. So you can start to make some assumptions about how those groups are like self-organized based on those sizes.
Yeah. Okay. And then final question for you, Andrew. Using your definition that you used about friendly, ambitious nerds being the people who tend to thrive the most in Fractal. If one of our listeners right now is identifying as one of those friendly, ambitious nerds, if they're getting really excited about the idea of joining Fractal for a month, several months, potentially even, staying there in the long term if the fit is awesome, how would they go about doing that practically?
Yeah, so these days, everything's decentralized is a common point that I've made a few times. So it's complicated. You basically just find somebody who lives at Fractal that you personally think you'd be friends with, and you reach out to them and you're like, hey, I want to visit New York for a couple weeks or for a month, like in these dates. I've heard really good things about Fractal, like would love to hop on a phone call with you or like chat about it or whatever. Alternatively, you could just message me. Like if you're literally listening to me and you like the way I'm talking about it, just DM me on Twitter. Alternatively, you could obviously just come to New York, not even stay at Fractal, and then like attend some of our public events because we have a lot of those. Alternatively, you could join our Discord, but in order to get that Discord invite link, again, you might need to message somebody and be like, hey, here's kind of who I am, and here's my background, and here are my interests, and how do I join the Discord? But basically we try to grow at the speed of relationships is what we say. So just try to form some casual relationship with literally anyone, including me. I'm very public. You're welcome to DM me. Anyone not internet is welcome to DM me. And you can just ask questions there. Oh, also, if you just go to like fractalcampus.com, realistically over time, or fractalnyc.com, both of those places, over time, those places will be updated with more fractals or more like of this type of civic society that exists around the world. So we have a group in London, Portugal, Vancouver, Toronto, Seattle, San Francisco, Geneva, Boston, and a few other places, Blackpool, London. And I don't know if we're like, eventually we'll basically maintain some active list of how to contact people in all of these places. If it's not on the website right now, it will be soon, someday.
And New York is the place to be right now because that's the place that's been in existence for 4 years now. And all the other ones are in development at the moment, right? Just started.
Yeah.
Okay. So go on sabbatical in those places in a couple of years' time, or help build them.
Yeah, exactly. Or go on a sabbatical because you want to go find these crazy people that are trying to rebuild their civic societies in whatever place you live. You just want to hang out.
Yep. Awesome. Good to end on that. Thank you, Andrew.
Bye.